On my 75th birthday, I brought a simple cake to celebrate with my family. My son grabbed it, laughed, and smashed it on the floor. He stared at me and sneered, "Pick it up and eat." Laughter echoed around the room. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat quietly, taking in every face. They believed they'd broken me. What they didn't realize was that I still held the documents and keys that truly mattered. By sunrise, everything changed, and no one saw it coming. Before we continue, hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. I always believed that family was everything. That's what my late wife Margaret used to say. "Walter, no matter what, you take care of your own." For 75 years, I tried to live by that. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I paid for my son's college, my daughter-in-law's medical bills, even the down payment on the house they now call their own. I thought I was building a legacy. I thought I was building trust. My son, David, was my pride and joy. He was the kind of boy who used to run to me after school, arms wide, shouting, "Dad!" like I was a hero. I remember the first time he rode a bike without training wheels. He crashed into a bush, scraped his knee, and looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I knelt down, wiped his face, and said, "You're stronger than you think, son." He believed me then. I believed it too. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Maybe it was after Margaret passed, when the house felt too big and the silence too heavy. Maybe it was when David started making more money than I ever did. When he moved into that big house on the hill and started calling me old man instead of dad. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself it was just the way things go. Kids grow up, they get busy, they forget. Still, I never missed a birthday, never forgot a holiday. Every year, I'd show up with a card, a small gift, and a smile, hoping for a little warmth in return. Sometimes I get it. Most times, I didn't. This year, my 75th, I decided to keep it simple. I bought a small vanilla cake from the bakery down the street, the same one Margaret and I used to visit on Sunday mornings. I wrote my own name on it in shaky icing, "Happy birthday, Walter," because I knew no one else would. I pressed my best shirt, the one Margaret always said made me look sharp, and walked the 3 blocks to David's house, cake trembling in my hands. When I arrived, the house was already full, music blaring, laughter echoing from the kitchen, beer bottles clinking on the counter. David's friends, not mine. My grandchildren were there too, faces buried in their phones, barely glancing up as I walked in. I stood in the doorway, cake in hand, waiting for someone to notice. David finally saw me. He rolled his eyes, barely hiding his annoyance. "Dad, you didn't have to come. We're kind of busy here." His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. I smiled anyway, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "It's my birthday," I said. "I just wanted to spend it with family." A few people turned to look, confused. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, gave me a tight smile and went back to her conversation. My grandkids whispered to each other, glancing at the cake like it was some kind of joke. I set it down on the table, careful not to let it slip. 7 candles, 1 for each decade and a little more. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would sing. But David just laughed. "You bought your own cake?" he said, loud enough for the whole room. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my face burn, but I kept my smile. "Didn't want to trouble anyone," I said softly. He came closer, towering over me, that cruel grin spreading across his face. "You really shouldn't have, Dad." Before I could answer, he picked up the cake with both hands and, in one swift motion, hurled it to the floor. It landed with a wet thud, frosting splattering across my shoes. The candles flickered, one still burning on its side. The room erupted in laughter, deep, cruel, drunk. Someone even clapped. My knees wobbled, but I didn't fall. I just looked at him. My own flesh and blood, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, now looking down at me like I was dirt. The sound of laughter faded behind my ears. All I could hear was my heart, slow and heavy. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just nodded, turned around, and walked out the door. But as I stepped into the cold night, I made a silent promise. This would be the last time anyone made me feel small in my own family. I walked home alone, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. What they didn't know was that I still held the keys to everything they thought was theirs. The walk home that night felt longer than any I'd taken before. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Each step echoed with the sound of laughter I'd left behind. My son's voice, sharp and mocking, the snickers of his friends, the indifference of my own grandchildren. I tried to shake it off, but humiliation clings to you like a second skin. When I reached my small house, the silence was almost merciful. I set my keys on the table, sat down in the kitchen, and stared at the crumbs of dignity still clinging to my shoes. I thought about every sacrifice that led to this moment. The mortgage I paid, the college tuition, the loans, the endless second chances. I had built their world piece by piece, and now I saw what they'd done with it. I lit one of the broken candles from the cake, set it on a saucer, and watched the flame dance. The room was filled with memories. Margaret's laughter, David's first steps, the echo of family dinners that once filled this house with warmth. Now, all that remained was the cold, hard truth. I was alone, and the people I loved most had turned me into a punchline. The next morning, the humiliation still burned. I could hear the laughter in my head before I even opened my eyes. People say shame passes, but they're wrong. It settles in your bones, lingers like a smell you can't wash off. I sat at the table staring at the single candle, its wax hardened overnight. Something inside me had changed forever. I replayed the scene in my mind. David's smirk, Lisa's averted eyes, my grandchildren's whispers. Even the neighbors I'd helped for years pretended not to see what was happening. I had become entertainment, the old man who outlived his usefulness, the relic who didn't know when to stop showing up. For a moment, I almost believed I deserved it. That's what years of giving without thanks do to you. It trains you to take disrespect as if it were love in disguise. But as I watched the candlelight die against the floor, something inside me went still, not broken, just cold. Like ice forming where warmth used to be, I didn't leave my house for 2 days. The laughter from that evening replayed in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cake splattering on the floor, the frosting smeared across my shoes, the faces grinning through the smoke of the candles I had lit with trembling hands. I kept asking myself, where did I go wrong? I gave them everything. I built the roof above their heads. I paid for their weddings. I saved them from their own mistakes more times than I could count. Yet, when it was my turn for a moment of grace, they gave me humiliation. On the third morning, I got dressed slowly, carefully. I pressed my shirt, brushed my hair, and looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't broken. He was awake. For 75 years, I had lived like a man trying to prove his worth. Now, I didn't need to prove anything. I only needed to remember. I walked outside, the air cold but clean. The street was quiet, just the way I liked it. I stopped by the bench near my gate, the one my grandchildren used to sit on when they visited. I ran my hand over the wood and smiled faintly. They hadn't come by in months. They had their father's arrogance now, the same blindness that mistakes kindness for weakness. That blindness would cost them everything. Back inside, I made tea and sat at the table where I used to share meals with my wife. The chair beside me was empty, but I could almost hear her voice. She used to say, "When pride grows louder than love, let silence answer it." I finally understood what she meant. Revenge didn't need rage, it needed patience. Quiet patience, the kind that builds and waits until the right moment. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness anymore, it was preparation. I went through old drawers, boxes, and filing cabinets. Every piece of paper I touched told a story. Bank accounts, property deeds, business shares. I had signed everything in their favor years ago because I trusted them. But they had made a mistake. They never checked how much power I still had. I sat at my old oak desk, the one Margaret and I bought when we first moved into this house. The surface was worn smooth by decades of bills, letters, and birthday cards. Most of them sent, few of them received. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a battered binder, its edges frayed, its contents heavy with the weight of a lifetime. Inside were the documents that told the real story of my family. Deeds to every property, bank account statements, share certificates, and legal agreements. My name was on every line, my signature still strong, still binding. I had given David and Lisa everything they had. Houses, cars, even the business they bragged about at every party. But what they never realized was that I had never truly let go. Every transfer, every gift, every inheritance was protected by clauses, trusts, and conditions. I had built safety nets, not just for them, but for myself. Margaret always said, "Don't give away the keys to your kingdom until you're sure they know how to rule. I thought I was being cautious. Now I saw I was being wise. I ran my fingers over the papers, each one a quiet weapon. I remembered the day I signed the first deed over to David. He was so grateful then, hugging me, promising to take care of the family. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love was enough. But love, I learned, is not a contract. It's a risk, and sometimes it's a mistake. The humiliation of my birthday replayed in my mind, sharper now, more focused. I saw the way David looked at me, not as a father, but as an inconvenience. I saw Lisa's smirk, the way she turned away, embarrassed by my presence. I saw my grandchildren, eyes cold, hearts closed. I realized then that I had spent my life building a fortress for people who saw me as a burden. That was the breaking point. I stood up, my knees creaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. I walked to the window and looked out at the city I had helped build. One brick, $1, one sacrifice at a time. I thought about all the times I had bailed David out of trouble, paid off his debts, covered his mistakes. I thought about the nights I sat up worrying about his future, about the future of my grandchildren. I thought about the promises I made to Margaret, to always protect our family no matter what. But protection, I realized, doesn't mean enabling. It doesn't mean letting yourself be trampled in the name of love. It means knowing when to draw the line, when to say, enough. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of my old friend, Mr. Patel, the family lawyer. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Walter, it's been a while. How are you?" I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue. "I need your help, Raj. It's time to activate the clauses. All of them." There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet understanding. "Are you sure?" I looked around my empty house, the silence pressing in. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He promised to start the process immediately. The wheels were in motion. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting out of necessity, out of justice, out of self-respect. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since Margaret died. No dreams, no laughter echoing through the dark, just the steady beat of my own heart, reminding me that I was still here, still standing. The next morning, I made a list. Every account, every property, every asset that still bore my name. I called the bank manager, a man who had known me for decades. "Transfer all joint accounts to my private ledger," I said. "Effective immediately." He didn't ask why. He just said, "It will be done by morning." I called the real estate agent. "List every property under my authority, private buyers only, no exceptions." By noon, the first offers started coming in. The house David lived in, the summer cottage Lisa claimed as her retreat, the business office they used as their personal playground, all of it was now in play. Every signature, every clause, every piece of paper was a step toward reclaiming what I had built. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt justified. I felt awake. As the sun set, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere across town, David and Lisa were laughing, drinking, living in comfort they thought was theirs forever. They had no idea that by morning, their world would begin to crumble. The night before everything changed, I sat at my desk, the city's glow painting gold stripes across the floor. I could almost hear Margaret's voice in the hush, steady and reassuring. "You're not cruel, Walter. You're just done being used." I poured myself a cup of tea, hands steady, and began to work through the list I'd made. Every detail mattered. Every step had to be perfect. First, the bank accounts. Over the years, I'd set up joint accounts for David and Lisa, even for the grandchildren. I'd let them use my name, my credit, my reputation. They thought it was a gift. They never realized it was a leash. I called the bank manager again, this time with a tone that left no room for questions. "Transfer all remaining funds to my private account. Mark the secondary holders inactive. No notifications to them until the process is complete." He hesitated, then said, "Understood, Mr. Hanley. You'll have confirmation by morning." Next, the properties. 9 in total. Some in David's name, some in Lisa's, some in trusts I'd created decades ago. Each one had a clause, a hidden line in the contract that kept final ownership under my authority until my death. They'd never bothered to read the fine print. They'd never thought I'd use it. I called Raj again. "Activate every clause. List all properties for sale. Use the private buyers. Fast transactions. No haggling." He whistled softly. "All of them, Walter?" "All," I said. No exceptions. He promised to get started immediately. I could hear the click of his keyboard, the urgency in his voice. He knew what this meant. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Then, the business shares. David always bragged about being the CEO, about running the company I'd built from nothing. But he never understood how the shares worked, how control could sit quietly behind small numbers. My name didn't need to be in the spotlight to rule the board. It was in the fine print, the kind they never bothered to read. I drafted a letter to the board, invoking my right to dissolve their positions as directors, to revoke their access, and to freeze their salaries. I attached the necessary documents, signed every page with a steady hand, and sent it off before midnight. By the time I finished, the city was quiet. I stood at the window, looking out at the skyline. Somewhere out there, my family slept soundly, dreaming of a future built on my sacrifices. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was already shifting. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not the peace of surrender, but the peace of action. The peace of a man who finally remembered his own worth. At dawn, I walked to the bakery where I'd bought my birthday cake. The owner, a kind man with flour-dusted hands, looked up in surprise. "You're up early, Mr. Hanley. Another cake?" I shook my head. "Not today. Just needed a walk." He nodded, understanding more than I said. "You handled it with class, old friend." "Most men would have shouted." I smiled, a small, private smile. "I shouted," I said quietly, "just not with words." Back home, I watched the sun rise over the city. I thought about David and Lisa, about the grandchildren who barely knew my name. I thought about the years I'd spent giving, forgiving, hoping for a little gratitude. I realized I didn't need their thanks. I didn't need their love. I only needed my dignity. By noon, the first offers on the properties started coming in. One for the house, David bragged about online. Another for the summer cottage, Elisa called her sanctuary. Each one sold faster than the next. The signatures were digital, the transfers instant. Years of wealth disappeared from their names and returned to mine in less time than it had taken them to humiliate me. I moved on to the business holdings. The board responded quickly, some with confusion, some with anger. But the paperwork was airtight. My authority was absolute. By the end of the day, David's access was revoked, his salary frozen, his title meaningless. I watched the notifications roll in. Sales confirmed, accounts moved, positions dissolved. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel regret. I felt clean, like I'd finally washed away years of disappointment and disrespect. As the sun set, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat by the window. The city was alive with possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt free. Across town, David and Lisa were about to wake up to a world they no longer recognized. Their comfort, their pride, their security, gone, with nothing but silence to explain it. The morning my plan came to life. The world outside was calm, birds chirping, sunlight streaming through my kitchen window, the city humming with its usual routine. But inside the homes of my son and his family, chaos was about to erupt. I imagined David waking up, stretching in his king-sized bed, reaching for his phone to check his bank balance as he did every morning. Only this time, instead of the comforting numbers he was used to, he'd see a message. "Account restricted. Please contact your branch." I pictured the confusion on his face, the way his brow would furrow, the first flicker of panic in his eyes. Lisa would be next. She'd tried to pay for her morning coffee with her platinum card, only to have it declined. She'd call the bank, her voice sharp and demanding. But the answer would be the same. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the account is no longer accessible to you." The call started early. My phone lit up with David's name, then Lisa's, then the grandchildren. I let them ring. I let the silence answer for me. Each unanswered call was a reminder of the silence they gave me on my birthday. The silence that followed my humiliation. By mid-morning, the real estate agents began their work. David's house, the one I'd paid for, the one he'd filled with parties and pride, was the first to go. A polite but firm agent arrived at his door, papers in hand, informing him that the property had been sold. He had 30 days to vacate. No exceptions. Lisa's summer cottage was next. She received an email, then a call, then a visit. Her sanctuary, her escape, was no longer hers. The new owners wanted to move in immediately. She protested, threatened, pleaded, but the contracts were ironclad. There was nothing she could do. The business office, the one David called his, was stripped from him in a single afternoon. The board met without him, voted him out, and changed the locks. His name was erased from the registry, his access revoked. He tried to fight it, but every document, every clause, every signature was legal and final. By noon, the news had spread. Neighbors whispered, friends called, reporters sniffed around for a story. 9 proud family members stripped of everything overnight. Some said it was a market crash. Others whispered about fraud. But the truth was simpler. Pride had finally met the man who built it. I watched it all unfold from my small house on the hill, sipping tea as the world I'd built for them unraveled. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction, a sense of justice, of balance restored. That afternoon, they came to my door, all of them. David, Lisa, the grandchildren, and even a few of the friends who had laughed at me that night. They stood on my porch, their faces pale, their eyes hollowed by disbelief. David was the first to speak. Dad, what's going on? The bank says you closed the accounts. The house, my house, is being sold. The business, I held up a hand, stopping him. Your house? Your business? Tell me, David, who paid for those things? Who signed the deeds? Who built the foundation you've been standing on all these years? He looked down, shame burning in his cheeks. Lisa started to cry, her hands shaking. The grandchildren stood behind them, silent for once, their arrogance gone. You laughed at me, I said quietly. You told me to eat cake off the floor. You made my birthday a joke. Now you know what it feels like to lose everything you took for granted. David tried to protest, but the words caught in his throat. We didn't mean... I shook my head. You meant every word, every laugh, every look. You thought I was weak. You thought I was finished. But you forgot who built your world. The silence between us was heavy, thick with regret and realization. For the first time, they saw me. Not as an old man, not as a burden, but as the architect of their comfort, the keeper of their future. I handed David an envelope. Inside was a single sentence. You will never know hunger if you learn humility. He read it, his hands trembling, and looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I closed the door, leaving them on the porch with nothing but their shame and the echo of their own laughter. But my story wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still one thing left to do. The house was quiet after they left. So quiet I could hear the tick of the old wall clock, the one Margaret bought at a yard sale decades ago. I sat by the window, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. The same city I'd helped build, the same city that now whispered my story in every corner. I wondered what David and Lisa were saying to each other as they walked away, their pride stripped, their future uncertain. I wondered if my grandchildren understood what had happened, or if they just felt the cold sting of loss. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished, like I'd finally closed a chapter that had been bleeding for years. The pain of that birthday, the humiliation, the laughter, it all faded into something smaller, something manageable. I realized then that revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. It's about reclaiming your own worth, your own dignity. It's about reminding yourself that you matter, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase, just a few clothes, my old watch, and a photograph of Margaret smiling in the garden. I left the house as the sun rose, locking the door behind me for the last time. I placed the key under the mat, a silent goodbye to a life that no longer fit. A taxi waited at the curb. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, helped me with my bag. Where to, sir? He asked. Anywhere quiet, I replied. He nodded, and we drove through the waking city, past the bakery where my story began, past the empty houses that once belonged to my family. I watched the world pass by, feeling lighter with every mile. I settled in a small cabin by the sea, far from the noise of inheritance and ego. The air smelled of salt and pine, the waves a constant, soothing presence. I spent my days walking along the shore, feeding birds, watching the tide wash away footprints, just as time had washed away the laughter of that night. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I'd think about David and Lisa, about the grandchildren who once called me Grandpa, with joy in their voices. I wondered if they'd ever understand what I'd done, or why. I wondered if they'd ever find me, or if they'd even try. I didn't wish them harm. I wished them awareness. I hoped that, in losing everything, they'd finally see the value of respect, of humility, of family. I hoped they'd learn that comfort is a gift, not a right. That love is earned, not owed. One day, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the water, I wrote a letter to Margaret. I told her everything. About the cake, the laughter, the revenge, the peace I'd finally found. I told her I missed her, that I wished she'd been there to see it all. I told her I was proud of the man I'd become, even if it took me 75 years to get there. I sealed the letter and placed it in the drawer beside her photograph. I knew she'd understand. She always did. The world moved on. The city forgot my name, but I remembered who I was. I remembered what I'd built, what I'd lost, and what I'd reclaimed. I remembered that dignity is worth more than any inheritance, any house, any bank account. And in the end, that was enough. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear a knock at the door, a sound that made my heart race, a sound that reminded me that some stories never truly end. Would I open it? Would I forgive? Or would I let the past stay buried, where it belonged? The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the quiet cabin. I sat frozen, the mug of tea in my hands trembling just a little. The sun had set, and the only light in the room was the soft glow of the lamp beside Margaret's photo. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, letting whoever was on the other side walk away, just as I had walked away from my old life. But curiosity, or maybe hope, got the better of me. I stood, my knees stiff, and walked to the door. I hesitated, hand on the knob, heart pounding in my chest. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. There, on the porch, stood David. He looked nothing like the man who had thrown my cake on the floor. His hair was unkempt, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. He held his hat in his hands, twisting it nervously. Behind him, the night was cold and still. "Dad," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled through the pines, and the waves crashed in the distance. I saw the boy he used to be, the one who scraped his knee and looked to me for comfort, the one who used to say, "Don't let go, Dad." He looked up, tears shining in his eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was lost. I forgot who you were, who I was." I felt the old ache in my chest, the ache of love and disappointment, of hope and fear. I wanted to reach out, to pull him into an embrace, to forgive him. But I also remembered the sting of humiliation, the years of being overlooked, the laughter that had cut deeper than any knife. "I don't know if I can forgive you, David," I said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can listen." He nodded, shoulders sagging with relief. "That's all I ask, Dad. Just let me try to make it right." We stood there in the doorway, two men bound by blood and regret, by love and loss. I didn't know what the future would hold. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible. But I knew that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I let him inside. We sat at the table, the same way Margaret and I used to, and talked long into the night. About the past, about mistakes, about the possibility of starting over. It wasn't easy, it wasn't simple, but it was real, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. If you loved this story of family drama, betrayal, and ultimate justice, hit the like button and subscribe for more emotional storytelling and true-life revenge stories. Share your own experiences with toxic relationships or family betrayals in the comments below, because sometimes the best way to heal is to tell your story.